record this introductory section. So first of all, welcome to BoostCamp. This is what we've got in store for you this morning. So up to about 10 o'clock, going to run through, we've done a little bit of the introductions, but I'm going to run through the focus and the topic for today, which is all around leadership and visioning. Then we're going to have those breakout spotlight sessions where, as we've talked individually with you, we'll have the focus on each one of you individually for about 20 minutes. We'll obviously have a break or two as we need, but we'll finish those at around about 10 past, 12, and then we'll have a wrap up and look at the next session. Usual online etiquette in terms of you don't really need to say this anymore because everybody's so used to Zoom, I'm absolutely sure, but please do generally try and avoid interruptions and be on mute when you're not speaking. But one of the things that's really important about these sessions, about BoostCamp, is the confidentiality. So everything that's raised within these sessions should stay within these sessions, please, and make sure that we treat things as properly confidential. Do try and challenge each other. So it is around asking questions, maybe some difficult questions, obviously in a positive and optimistic sort of way, but asking those challenging questions. So be prepared to challenge, but also to be challenged, and always be on the lookout for takeaways. And we will ask you at the end of each of your sections, and also at the end of the whole session, what your takeaways have been from this morning. And we'll ask you to capture those as well afterwards through an online feedback. And we'd like you very much to then take those takeaways away and do something about them in between sessions. And we'll come back to those at each session as well, and just see how we're doing. So there's an element of a little bit of gentle accountability as well within there. So we've done that bit. Who's in the room? This is just a quick outline. You should have all of these details already, but this is the way that it works. So there's the 4 key sessions. They're 3 weeks apart, always on a Wednesday morning, 9:30 to 12:30. The overall themes are around leadership value, but then getting that clarity, that alignment, and championing the execution. So the second session will be around value. The third session is around laser focus, and the final session then is around championing execution. Because as you've seen from the DISC profile, the leadership profile that you did, the way that we talk and the way that DISC talks about leadership has been needing to do that visioning piece, the alignment piece, and the execution piece. It all aligns actually very well with the way that we talk. And with each session, there'll be a one-to-one in between with either Mel, Louise, or myself. And we will go over any takeaways from the previous session and look towards the next session as well, and any other things that might come up. And there'll also generally be a little bit of homework in between, like the DISC profile benchmarking exercise that you've done. There'll be a similar one, but about the business, around value next time around. But there'll also generally be a video tutorial too, and something for you to think about in between sessions. And the people that get the most out of BoostCamp are obviously the ones that spend a little bit of time thinking about each session, both before it and afterwards. And then we do also have one of the things you'll get access to as part of this a little bit later on is access to our 90-day planning software, which you will certainly be able to use, and we'll take you through a little bit. We'll certainly be able to use that with yourselves and your teams through to definitely our next 90-day planning workshop, which will be in early January. And that's something that you might like to consider thinking about throughout as we go. Now, you've had the link through to look at the Scale Up Journey video. So you'll be familiar with this kind of visual and the way that we think about scaling up as a series of stepping stones, if you like, and ladders of success against those stepping stones, rather than straight line or wiggly growth, and this concept of the valleys of death in between, as you would have heard on the video. It's not always about scaling up to the next one. Sometimes it's about making sure that we've climbed that ladder properly and we've entrenched ourselves really well at that particular stepping stone. And we're not saying that everybody's got to keep moving up. And certainly at times like this, then some of us are thinking about retrenching a little bit and making sure that we're resilient. But as Jem said, hopefully ready to really come out of this stronger than we went in. The numbers there, by the way, are around numbers of employees, and typically that's the way it works in terms of full-time employees. So as you've seen on the video, we can build a business for one person, a one-man band, but it's a very different, and it make that very successful, but it's a different kind of business from if we wanted to build a business with a team of 3 to 5 people. And these are generally, it's always sort of rules of thumb, but these are generally the kind of numbers where businesses can work really efficiently because of the team sizes, essentially, is the way it comes down to. But what's really important, I think, for today, and think about it as a whole, is that over the top of all of this comes building for value, because that essentially is what we're about as entrepreneurs, people leading businesses, is around creating value and making our business a valuable asset in its own right, because that gives us options in the way that we run our business. But a big part of it is the leadership, and typically up to a business with 8 to 12 employees, most of the focus is around developing ourselves as the person running the business, as the leader, and developing our own skills. But once we get beyond that step, we need to bring the people behind us and develop leaders within the business behind us. So the focus moves to developing other leaders within the business. And there's 1 or 2 people on this call who are here because they are the upcoming leaders within their businesses. And there's also that concept around delegation. Again, typically earlier on, it's around delegating the things that we're not so good at. So things that really we shouldn't be doing because we're not great at it. Somebody better placed to do it. So we're outsourcing, might be using a virtual assistant, that kind of thing. But again, as we scale, as we get beyond the 8 to 12 employees, typically, then we need to start to delegate ourselves out of those roles, and hence again bringing leaders in behind us. So at that point, we've actually got to start thinking about delegating the things that we are best at within the business or are good at, because if we're the only one that can bring in the sales, there's going to be a glass ceiling on where we can take the business to. So we become the bottleneck. So we've got to find a way to get ourselves out of that bottleneck. So that's just a quick overview of that scale up journey. I thought this might be quite fun to see people where everybody is on the leadership style. So I know that Robin asked me in my one-to-one whether we mix groups up and deliberately try and have a particular type of people in the various groups, and I explained when we run larger groups, we do a little bit of that. This has been just as it's come out, and we've got quite a split, as you can see, between the Panthers and the Dolphins. And then you've got myself and Louise and Mel, the way you can see there as well. So what that's likely to mean is that we'll have people like Graham, Jem, and Ben will be saying, "Come on, Kevin, get on with it." And hopefully Peter, Robin, and Pete and Mark will be thinking a little bit more about, hang on a minute, let's make sure everybody's all right and we're all going well together. So what that's going to mean is that when we come to the discussions, bear that in mind. When Ben says to somebody, just do it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. It's his panther coming out, and likewise with other people. So bear that in mind. But it's quite an interesting mix. So what we're going to have to be careful of as a group here, and it's probably going to be my role and Louise's role, because we've got probably the most of the owl of the C within us, is to try and make sure that we've covered off the detail and we've got things correct as we move on, and equally we'll rely on a couple of those people like Jem and Mel, particularly, who've got quite a lot of the monkey in them to keep us all enthusiastic and optimistic and motivated. All right. Anything anybody wants to comment on that very quickly before we move on?
The only thing that I'll comment on for you, those of you who haven't seen Mel, Kevin, and I working together, is you can see that we are quite well spread on the disc. So we have very, very different styles, and we work in a really good way, but we can sometimes sort of push each other along, and you'll see all of that happening and see how that interaction works and how we make it work within our team.
Good.
So what's interesting for me, Kevin, is that with 9 people, there's 2 quarters that haven't even been touched.
Yep.
So we've got no accurate, enthusiastic people within the group. So that tells me.
Yep. Yep. On the broad face of it, it might look like that, and I just that is not typical, by the way. I mean, it's unusual for us not to have monkeys in the group, right? Out and out monkeys. You know, that's a strong group normally. But equally, as you've seen from individual profiles, it's not quite as simple as, well, that's where your dot is and you're only in that particular segment. We know that we've got shading in different areas. So, you know, without, I'm sure Robin won't mind, but I know that she's got actually a lot of C within her profile. She's got a pull to that, and equally those of us that are close to the edges of a segment have got quite a big pull towards some of the other areas. So it's not a case of we don't have any of that. It's just that we don't have an out and out pure monkey or an out and out pure owl within the group. Jem, you're on mute. Sorry, didn't catch that.
I quite like the idea of being a monkey panther.
There you go.
It sounds quite exciting.
Yeah, you're a monkey with sharp claws and teeth. Yeah, there you go. And we got a couple of dolphin monkeys as well, or monkey dolphins, and yeah.
We had a monkster in the last group, didn't we?
And I'm always in conflict with myself, because the D in me says just get on with it and do it, and the C in me says no, we need more information. We got to think about it a bit more. So that's me. I'm a little bit pulled in either direction on that. All right.
I think it's interesting that I'm a DI, and so is Graham, and so is Jem, and that's who I'm having my one-to-ones with.
Yeah, yeah. So
we talked about this, didn't we, the last couple of days, guys, that, oh no, I read their reports. I was like, oh no, they're just like me.
And it's quite bizarre that Graham and I are also working together on something outside of this. So we're obviously sticking together here. And
I introduced them, so I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, there is a degree of that, just as long as you're aware of it, and you can therefore challenge each other and make sure, okay, well, hang on a minute, do we need to think about it from a dolphin's point of view a little bit more? You know, are we missing the effect of what that's going to have on the team, for example, a little bit, or do we need to do a bit more analysis on this? You know, it's our gut feel, we should just push ahead and do it, but actually, should we check before we jump feet first a little bit, or head first, or whatever? So good. Quick, I don't want to spend too long on this, but let's, I'd just like to have a quick think about what the differences are between leadership and management. So because that's, you know, we're focusing on leadership, and as we've said earlier on, you know, part of that challenge is developing ourselves as leaders as we go, but also developing other people in the business. So what sort of things do we think would fit into leadership and or management? So let me just come out of the presenter view for the moment, so that, oops, what have I done here? Let's do that. Let's just go back up to, oh, has that stopped the screen sharing as well, isn't it? That's not very good. So let's screen share that again. Right, there we are. Maybe that'll work now. Okay, there we go. So anybody want to pitch in as to a couple of things, differences between leadership and management? And we'll do this quite quickly. I don't want to spend too long laboring the point, but just a couple of things. Ben.
I was always told that a manager tells people what to do and a leader shows people what to do.
Okay, brilliant. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Peter?
My view of management is it's actually following through a process rather than creating the process.
Okay.
I would say leadership is strategic, management is operational.
Yeah. Brilliant. Any other thoughts? I think we're getting the basic idea, aren't we here? Anything, Robin, that you'd add?
I think that management is probably kind of more caught up in the detail in the day-to-day, whereas leadership is kind of looking at a wider strategy, maybe.
Yeah. So sort of, yeah, bigger picture sort of thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Big picture. Okay. Brilliant. Good. All right. Any other thoughts, Jem? No.
No, not this. Not over above that one.
Okay. So let's leave that there, and I'll go back to the presenter view here, and do that. Is that still sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Seems to be random as to whether it stops the sharing or not when I go between the different views. So I quite like this. This is Stephen Covey's view of leadership and management. So if you imagine a group of producers cutting their way through the jungle, they've got the machetes, they're carving their way through. They're producers, they're problem solvers. And they're cutting their way through that undergrowth, and they're cutting it out and clearing a path. And the managers are behind them. They're sharpening the machetes. They're writing policies and procedure manuals. They're holding muscle development programs, bringing in improved technologies, and working up schedules and compensation programs for the machete wielders. All right, that's the managers. The leader is the one who climbs the tallest tree in the jungle, surveys the entire situation, and yells, "Wrong jungle." All right. So there's one way of looking at it, and there's a couple of things here as well. But Peter talked a little bit about this, I think, in what he just said. So leadership, the action of leading a group towards a common goal, and management typically is defined as the process of dealing with or controlling things or people. And there's a few extra things there. And what I'll do is I'll send this presentation out afterwards so that you can look at the detail here rather than go through it in detail here. But I think we pulled out some of the key things there, I think, as we went through. So why do we use DISC? Why is it important, or why is it important to understand ourselves, and how is that relevant? So we've got this infinite loop going on typically, and one of the things that DISC is really good for helping us with, and there's other tools around as well, is helping us to know ourselves. And then that allows us to lead ourselves, because once we can see and understand where our strengths are, but also where perhaps our challenges are, we can think about how we might want to improve ourselves. But we've all got traits, behavioral traits, and we will recognize some of these, and some of these we won't recognize. There'll be things that other people perhaps see in us, and that's why doing an exercise like DISC and the work of leaders is quite useful. But those traits tend to show themselves in the way that we behave, in the way that we act, and that's the next step on this, which of course have consequences, which then end up with the reality, the results that we would get. So that's why we need to think about it, because if you think, if let's just take me, one of the D in me, the panther in me, when I'm working with a business owner, wants me to say, "Oh, that's what you should do," all right, and very quickly just come out with something and tell them what to do. That's the action that I might have, which is to jump to a conclusion and tell somebody what to do. The consequence of that is that I may or may not get it right. I may not really have understood the situation fully, and the result of that is that the business owner might not think that what I've talked about is particularly good. So one of the ways that I have to adapt myself is to find ways that I'm always asking questions, and I make myself ask questions, take a little bit more time before I jump to conclusions, and that way, hopefully, at the end of the day, the consequence is that I understand things much better, and that when we then come to a joint conclusion as to what we need to do, then the result is better. But we've all got our own traits that we will have seen through the DISC profiling. As I've said to each of you individually, and Mel would have done as well, it's not as if you didn't know these things. We're all experienced business people, and we all kind of intuitively are understanding ourselves, understanding others. But using a framework like DISC helps us to identify those traits a little bit more in ourselves, to think about ways that we can maybe change the way that we act, because some of our traits are good and some are not so good, but also when we're leading others, because we can help them as well with that. So that's that side of it. And as I mentioned earlier on, the reason we particularly like the DISC the leadership profile, the work of leaders profile, is the way that it goes on beyond the basic behavioral profiling into the visioning, alignment, and execution piece, which chimes really well with the way that we look at the world from developing our businesses and ourselves as leaders to make. And what tends to happen in businesses that we've seen a lot is that it's rare to find somebody that's really good at all of those things naturally. We normally find people that are either really good at the big picture blue sky things, but they're not necessarily so good at the execution, at the follow through. And equally, we find people that are really good at the follow through, at the execution, at keeping the plate spinning, but not necessarily so good at climbing the tree and having a look around to see whether in the right jungle. And there's that what has been referred to as the strategy execution gap, where and that's what a lot of what we try and do with business owners, and what we're trying to do really and get people to think about now is how do we bridge that gap. And alignment is often the key, but also it's understanding ourselves and others within the business. So that's part of what we're trying to do here with this idea. Now, I'm not going to go through these, but I just wanted to flick these up quickly. And as I say, I'll send these out because within your DISC reports, you've got nice summaries of the different styles and their motivators, what they fear, the limitations of those things. But there's just a little bit more here that will help you to see things like the value of the team. So for the Panthers here, then there's lots of great stuff. Value to the team is definitely sort of the challenge oriented, innovative, looking at the bottom line, getting the results. They don't like being overly constrained, but can come across as lack of tact and diplomacy, and they can under stress revert to type and be maybe a bit aggressive, egotistical, that kind of thing. And typically the emotion is one of anger a little bit within there. They're frustrated that think people aren't doing things that in the way that they would feel. The monkeys within us, very optimistic people, love lots of contact with other people, don't like the detail, and that's where the possible limitations come in. So that it's a follow through, but the detail on it, it'll be all right, it'll be fine. That's sort of thing. And also tend to jump from one thing to the next. So it's a great thing to do today, and then tomorrow there's something else that's more important. And optimism is a typical emotion of the monkey. The dolphins are much more around the amiable, working as teams. So they're really dependable, service-orientated, patient, logical thinkers. Love long-term relationships. Love stable environments. Possibly they don't tend to like change so much. And can have a little bit more of a difficulty in establishing priorities, and they're not really emotional. So in terms of the emotion of a high S, they don't really get worked up because they're much more steady, and that's where the S comes from. And then with the owls, then very analytical, really good problem solvers, high standards. These are the ones that you need to make sure that you've got the I's dotted and the T's crossed. But they can come across potentially as being overly critical and fussy. Certainly to a high monkey, they might feel the monkey might feel that a C is an owl is a bit too critical. Also, they come across as being a little bit aloof and cool, and it's not because they don't like people. It's partly because they're more reserved. They're typically more introverted type characters, and their biggest emotion is one of fear of getting it wrong. That's what they're most fearful of. So any questions before we move on around that quick overview of leadership and the styles? No, all happy?
All happy. Sorry, I'm just going to have to grab a charger. Forgive me, I'm going to run.
Yep.
I'm keeping my video on.
Okay.
Doing a bit of challenge Annika for those of us of a certain age.
All right. So I'm going to